Thank you for being here today, and welcome to the future. We're talking about the big shift. What is going to happen in the next years to this sector is going to impact dramatically this country specifically, for obvious reasons, being an island, and for historical reasons. So what I want to share with you today is basically a little bit of a journey. First, talking about the issues and the possible solutions. And what is the impact for the shipping lines in the maritime energy transition? What is the role that the locations, the ports, have in this transition? What is our role, obviously, because we are investing heavily in the sector? And what is the role of this country to become a powerhouse of this change, of the big shift? So, first, the big shift could be an issue, could be an opportunity. Obviously, we see that as an opportunity in reality. And just to see the big picture, we are in the fourth industrial revolution. That means that we are fueled by artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, etc., etc. We haven't even started that yet, and we have a fifth one already coming. There is a cognitive type of revolution that is going to impact everything of what we're going to do, and obviously will have an impact on the global trade as well. What are the impacts? First, there will be an on-demand manufacturing logic that is going to stress even more the logic of on-demand logistics. There will be an acceleration in trade, apart of some issues in the short term deriving from a bit of a rivalry, as you know. But that drives an immense digital capacity. We need a lot of data, and we need a lot of energy, clean energy, and we don't have it. So the key issue here is how can we manage in a sustainable and environmentally sustainable way this increase in electricity demand, or energy demand, more generally speaking, and how can we manage the acceleration of decarbonisation in all the sectors? So the first question is, are we ready in the maritime sector? Because this is coming, it's already happening. Many countries, in China, for example, electric ships are already a reality. There are massive investments to be made. And just to use the similarity with the electric vehicle business, we are now, it seems that we are shocked about the invasion of Chinese electric vehicles. That has been planned a few years back, setting targets for 2024 for having 5 million cars manufacturing capacity for each of the 5 largest manufacturers in China, and battery for fueling those cars. So it's a matter of planning ahead, especially in a sector like this, that requires a lot of investments in terms of infrastructure. So the challenge, first, 80% of the global trade is basically facilitated one way or the other by the maritime sector. It accounts for 3% of CO2, which is not that much, apparently, compared to other sectors, but is, because it's big, is massively important. Now, CO2 is going to kill us in the long run, while SOx and NOx are going to kill us very fast. And anyone who is hosting a large port, any city like that, knows the impacts on health that this has. And the challenge is that if we want to turn into a clean sector, the whole maritime sector by 2040, we need 4 petawatt hours of energy, clean energy, which is the annual consumptions of the United States. So we have to think in a network of location worldwide how to provide this electricity, how to generate this electricity, how to trade it. Fortunately, there are no limitations in terms of technology. The technology is already here. Fortunately, we don't have big issues in terms of identifying also the money around that. But I think that in the big shift is basically between the devils and saints. So from tree huggers to oil and gas polluters, we are in the middle. We must be in the middle. It is a feasibility area. And the feasibility is dictated by what is feasible from an ethical, environmental, and economic, financial perspective. And as an old rule, follow the money. Because without that, we cannot do anything. And the good news is that we have $7 trillion every single year in the next decade. This decade until 2030, $5 trillion. This year, $3 trillion already invested. That is more than twice what was invested in oil and gas, traditional carbon-based energy. So it's already happening. Why? Not because governments are putting targets, but because this money is looking for returns on their investments. And investing in green economy is a very good investment because it's a long-term opportunity in terms of sustain from an economical perspective any type of business. And as a friend of mine told me a few weeks ago, said, it's been 2 or 3 years that our shareholders, he is chairing some of the London Stock Exchange major companies, it's the first time that our shareholders are starting to question our role in the board and question the money that we are making in those roles, because the long-term sustainability is a big issue. It's not just consumers creating a pull on the market. We can take a bit of time, he said. But investors, we have quarters. We have no time. And why this is relevant? Because this money is coming from our pockets. This is the money of our pensions. And when we ask a pension fund to invest our own money, we also ask them, please invest for the future of our children. That's why an enormous amount of money is shifting towards green economy. And I would expect this to increase much more in the years to come. So these are, in my opinion, conservative estimates. Now, the interesting part is we are talking about electrification. So intelligent fuel, this is what we, as a company, provide. Intelligent fuel, we have a division operating in hydrogen, but we, as Nat Power Marine, we are basically in the business of intelligent fuel, which means something that is smarter, because you cannot determine when to buy this fuel without knowing when it's going to be used, when the price would be more attractive, etc., etc. So there is a lot of data crunching in order to reduce the cost of this fuel and make it cheaper, because this is cheaper than any other alternative. And it has been like this since 2013. Renewable energy are the cheaper source of electricity, of energy in the world. It's more powerful, especially if you think about the torque that a tug needs, or things, or special vertical applications. It's much more powerful. So it's absolutely up to par with the technical requests. It's cleaner, obviously, and because of that, it's customer friendly. 2 types of customers. The final users, meaning the consumers that are asking for clean products, whatever they are, and the cargo owners, which is more relevant in the short term for the operators in the sector. So what we are doing is basically creating a global network, and this is what we need. So we are one of the operators, actually, the only one for now, but we hope that many others will come on the market, because obviously 4 petawatt-hours is not something that can be done by one operator. And for this reason, we have to copy the logic, the economic logic of the internet. We give for granted that next year, internet is going to work. even if we double the traffic because of artificial intelligence. We give it for granted. Why? Because nobody owns internet. Everybody owns internet. Everybody can add to the internet. Everybody can invest and make money out of the internet. So the logic is the creation horizontally of massive investments that can multiply very, very fast. And this is the characteristic of networks. Now, what is global trade? It's a network of networks. On land, sea, air, it's a network of networks. It's an internet. So if we think about that in this logic, and we think about the internet of energy that is needed to do that, then we can reach very easily those targets. Because the money is there. It's the economic model, it's the way we can organize ourselves that would make the difference. So the key point is creating, and we are creating the first part of this network, of locations to deliver in an efficient way fuel. So clean electricity charges. Charges. It's all about propulsion. Everyone is talking about cold ironing. Cold ironing is a short-term element that has become a hot topic because government, because of pollution in the cities, etc., they are basically setting targets, which is perfectly fine. But the infrastructure that we are creating cannot be just for cold ironing. It is to be planned for propulsion. Electric propulsion. And this is very important because anyone who has to make investment next year or the next decade regarding the fleet has to know that they can convert, retrofit, or order new ships that are electric, full electric, or hybrid. And in order to do this, they need a network, which was exactly what happened for electric vehicles. The creation of the network created a demand. And as it happened for electric vehicles, this is going to happen to this sector as well. So basically, we are coming from that type of experience in the previous investment we made. And it's the same issue, let's say, on steroids, because it's global from day one. And obviously, the size of the EV, in this case, electric vessels, is massive. So the logic is that we have to create a network, and so we have to follow the different locations where it makes sense to charge, and therefore the logic is to integrate green corridors. I prefer, say, blue, frankly, but it's in the jargon right now. So these are screenshots of I was talking about a lot of data. We invested over the years for creating the reference system to calculate, analyze demand, determine where to invest, and we are pick and choose the locations, depending on where the shipping lines are going to provide the service. So places where they call at, they anchor, not just they berth in port. So these are examples, and everything is around the creation of routes, because this is an internet of network, a network of network. And the interesting part is that from a technological perspective, it's even easier because the technology is there. There's nothing that we have to invent. In fact, we are technological agnostic. The point is what is behind the plug. So you have a lot of people selling plugs, but that's not the problem. A plug is a device. A business model is the solution. So with this logic, shipping lines can determine what is the next step in terms of making their investment on their fleets, and they can tap into the 7 trillion that I mentioned before. So what is instead the roles of the ports? Well, we prefer the word location because ports are just one set of possible locations. So there are opportunities for ports and risks. The first one is electricity is fuel for vessels. It seems quite simple statement. But if you think about that, is there any port that is making money out of current fuel? Yes. How? In logistics. They are not oil and gas companies. They move that fuel. They offer the logistic of the fuel. Like you can fill, load and load, etc., etc. It's all around logistics. So if a port starts thinking of creating an infrastructure for delivering electric fuel, it's making a big mistake, in my opinion. Because it's not their business. Who is going to provide electricity? The local utility? No. 4 petawatt hours? No. Who is going to manage the cost of that electricity? Trading. Can you trade? No, you don't have the volumes, you don't have the competences. So how can you create a business for the port? Managing the logistics of the electricity, which is not creating the infrastructure, but allowing someone to create the infrastructure and run it and operate it. Because it's much more convenient. You can make more money without risks. So ports can earn from fuel logistics. And the interesting part is that that could also release equity, so that this equity can be used for investing in the core activities of ports, where the returns are higher and much more in control. So operations can be managed and integrated, and it's also a relatively quick solution for scope 3 reductions, because obviously whatever is the emission of ships, that count for the scope 3 emissions of the ports. What are the risks? The first and foremost, blackouts, because we need a dedicated infrastructure in the ports. A few years back, Tesla was a new thing. A friend of mine bought a Tesla. There were other 4 families in the same building. They saw very nice American car, so cool. We want a Tesla too. They charged the 5 Teslas at the same time in the evening, blew up the network of the building. It's a limitation because the characteristic of this energy is that it's very intermittent. The ship comes, charge, the ship goes. So we cannot work with the logic of creating a network that is on the peak, because the peak will be so high, so big, that the total amount of investment is very relevant. And second, there is a risk of blackouts. And as a port, you don't want to have blackouts because you also have tenants like supermarkets, chains with fridges and cold logistic over there. It would become a smelly problem, okay? So you don't want to have this type of blackouts. What you want to do is to protect your existing business and create a parallel network that is designed with the logic of the Internet of Energy. And that would allow to increase the demand as the adoption of electric ships will increase. The other thing is there's the risk of using CapEx for this network instead of using it for the core business of ports. And more importantly, there's no margin, because the margin is made by the electricity companies, by the generators of electricity. So, because there are no volumes, when we're talking about volumes, a port can think that is a very important thing in terms of volumes, but it's not. That's reality. You have to think about the entire country. That is the energy market. So there's no access, no scale. There's trading risks. So much better have a constant renting or tolling mechanism so that you have a constant flow of revenues in allowing someone else to manage a dedicated infrastructure at their own risk and costs. So the port options goes from full integrated to independent. I do on my own, or I integrate with someone else, ranging from low risk to very high risk on the opposite side. And the logic is when we operate, we prefer to say the infrastructure, we take care of the investment. Some ports already did some investment, taking grants, for example, from the government. The grants from government, European, UK, US, etc., all governments are putting money on the table. But this is for triggering the change and the shift. So the first block maybe is finance. What about the second, the third, the 10th? What about the rest of the operations? What about the infrastructure? So the other part is that even if there is an existing infrastructure, we operate operated infrastructure, even if it's a third-party one. Doesn't matter. And then there is a logic of client management, meaning what are the signals of when, what electricity, how much should I pay, etc., with the client side of it. And in our terminology, these are the different type of contracts that we have with ports. Now, what we are doing today, we're basically targeting 120 locations. We have already agreements, some of those are public, with port authorities, working with shipping operators, etc. So the network is growing. It's going to take time to do that. It's quite an endeavor. But, and it's a big one. You can see over 600 gigawatt hour already projected in terms of demand. In the UK, everything that is not a port is as important as the rest. So in the UK, behind the scenes of the ports or the locations, we are the largest developer in energy transition. We are not in renewable energy anymore as a concept that belongs to the last decade. It's all around creating an investment for solving one of the major issues. Where's the clean electricity? Who is going to generate it? Where you store it? How you transport it? So we have around 80 gigawatt hours of storage capacity, which is 1/5 of the total that would be needed, in our opinion, in the country. And we are the largest developer, as I was saying, in terms of gigawatts. And 1 in 5 of the new substations that will be built in this country will be built because we asked to do that. Actually, we put 600 million on the table, saying we can build it because the current operators, they are not Internet of Energy operators. They have been managing the grid like they have been doing for 140 years. So we are talking about the 4th, the 5th industrial revolution, and still we operate energy grid like our great-grandfathers or great-great-great-grandfathers were doing. It doesn't make any sense. So it's important that government in this country, since we probably have 5 years of ahead in terms of political stability, tackle the issue, because without changing the business model of the grid, there won't be any type of energy transition in this country, because we are going to have blackouts, not just in the port, in the country. Where to put this stuff, etc. We analyzed a lot of data. Here you have some examples. Again, it's all about data. It's all about knowledge. It's all about the creation of abilities and ways of reinterpreting the data. So, I would like to focus on the UK. There are two parts here. One is the UK energy transition. So how can we invest in this country, for the future of economic development in this country? And the second thing is, how can we position this country as a superpower? Is a soft power, that's why I choose the concert, because it's definitely one of the areas in which the UK is definitely leading. And that soft power could become particularly relevant in terms of what can be done next. So, the questions are, first, how can we get a portion of 7 trillion? 7 trillion, just to put in perspective, is 2 UKs in terms of size of the economy. It's twice the size of our economy, basically, give or take. So we have to intercept a bit of this money, a lot of this money, and bring it to the UK for our energy transition. Second, we can operate this money through the City of London because as a global financial hub, this is a huge opportunity. Then we have to develop the green economy using that money with a little bit of guidance from the government. But the interesting part is that we don't need hard money. And the key point is, how can we mobilize resources in a smart way without using or minimizing the use of taxpayers' money and give it back to taxpayer with multiplying factors, with a profit? Because this is the way you solve also the long-term issues regarding the deficit and position the city as I was mentioning before. So, in terms of needs, just for the program that we have in the next years in order of electrification of the maritime ports, etc., we're going to need 31-45 terawatt hours of clean electricity. So there's basically is around 10-15% of the total amount of electricity in the country. So that means there is more or less 25 to 30% more clean electricity than what we generate today. And this is on top of what all the other sectors are asking for. So the massive investment, even the targets of energy generation of this government are a little bit too shy. And the interesting part is that all the sectors are in competition, in the UK, anywhere else. Because obviously electricity is going to go to the sector or the best paying customer in a sense. So can we access that electricity? How we transport the electricity, the grid? How we price that electricity? How can we trade? Now, just to wrap up, we have a few proposals. One in finance, one in tax, and one in grid. So finance is basically, we have to start learning the way of creating a systematic, selective type of policy making. So the first one is interest-based. Oh, we have to fight inflation. What is the reason of this inflationary burst that we had? War in Ukraine? No, it was energy. So it's imported inflation, and every time since the first oil shock in the 70s, it's inflation that is imported because of oil and gas. So if we migrate to wind, sun, tide, they are local, nobody's paying for the source. It's just capex, so it's fixed price. No one can change the price itself, and therefore we can get rid, for the first time in history, we can get rid of one of the major sources of inflation. So this is the way you operate. So if you are the Bank of England or any central bank, you should consider, again, for 150 years or more or less, doing the things like our great-great-great-grandfathers were doing, increase interest rates across the board. No, the point is that we have to start creating policies that increase for sectors that are not relevant or will not be relevant in the future, or we want to decarbonize, and instead create opportunities for reducing the overall interest rates for those sectors. So the government could also step in and creating a first loss guarantee to lenders, saying there are very low chances of failing in such a big growing sector. So take that, You can even create insurance policies around that and grant it to the lenders so that they can provide more money to the system. And multiply taxpayers' money, because with just 3 billion of taxpayers' money, you can generate to 120 billion of investment for innovation. So, and 40 billion of that would come back in taxes, VAT, corporate tax, GST. Tax, selective capital gain tax. There is a lot going on discussing this. Fantastic. Just keep what is the current situation for this sector, and this is sufficient to create a positive discrimination that is basically attracting money to the sector. Grid, we already discussed about the model, so I'm going to keep it simple, but basically we need to go towards the logic of the Internet of Energy, and we have to switch to different logic in terms of monopolies. And last but not least, what is the marine specific? We can apply the same logic, for example, in detaxing investments that are cross-border. This is quite new, because if you want this to happen, you need to have an opportunity for creating the infrastructure that is needed at the different locations, even if they are abroad. So these are some of the examples. Join the emission certificate scheme, create low emission zones under the 200 nautical miles. By doing this, the UK, being an island, 98% of everything is coming in and out by ship. We can influence something that is even 4 or 5 times more, and some other estimates gives up to 9-10 times more, or what is the actual use of electricity for the marine sector in the UK, because we influence the rest of the routes. So the big shift is here. We have a massive opportunity. We can grab it. It's just political will or decisions, strategic decisions of the players in the sector. We are going to make our part. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano. I know we're running slightly late. Are you okay for a couple of questions?
Sure.
I've got one, and then we'll see if anyone in the audience has one, and then we'll wrap up. So the one I've got really is, how do we increase the visibility of the blue education, noting that you mentioned about government investment, with all the decision makers in government, whatever, to strengthen the political, institutional and financial support that we actually need?
In terms of education specifically?
Yeah.
Well, we have 3 things. The first one is that we don't have enough talent. There's a gap, obviously, because the size of what we have to do is so big. So it's fundamental to, A, create new opportunities for generating those talents, but also migrating them in different type of experiences in the companies. So in fact, this is part of the crucial elements. So in particularly, this is another reason. The UK system, educational system, universities, etc., has been one of the driver of the soft power in this country. Applied to this sector, we can regain the number 1 position. So it's a very good idea to invest a lot in universities and integration between the creation of the talents and the constant evolution, because obviously the competencies are going to degrade very fast, and given the speed of the sector.
No, thank you. Is anyone in the audience got a question?
Yes, thanks, Stefano. Yes, I'm Simon Goldsmith, Head of Strategic Sustainability at the University of Greenwich. It's kind of interesting, a question really of how we ramp up the delivery of the ships, I suppose. Is that, what's that model looking like? Because at the moment, again, if you kind of go to any port, or you can see how they're running on sort of oil really. So what's that growth rate really to kind of meet that model? Because again, it's a chicken and egg really, isn't it, in some ways? But what's that kind of tipping point where you think everybody's going to jump on board? What date?
the chicken and egg conundrum is the real thing in the sector. I've seen, if you see what happened in other sectors, the tipping point is when you A, create vertical applications, and B, focus on crucial nodes, because it's always the logic of the network, the internet in this logic. So there are nodes that are much more important than others. So that's why it's important to identify, not necessarily in terms of size, okay, but in terms of, for example, there are shipping lines that are much more advanced in terms of discussion of their impact on the environment, and they wanted to switch faster than others because they want or because they have the resources, or vice versa. You can, but you don't have the resources, etc. So in reality, it's not just the size of those nodes. So the key point is finding the right nodes. The second thing is working in verticals, because, for example, a tug operator is very specific. You go electric, you have the massive torque that you need for very, very short bursts. Going electric is no-brainer. It's cheaper than anything else. Or if you have, I came this morning by boat. So the Clipper has an electric version that they are hybrid. So these verticals are very easy. Others have completely different logic. So ferries, for example, there are ferries that have just 1 hour, then they go. So how can you burst that amount of electricity? So the technical solution would be slightly different. But the interesting part is that it's always doable. And our target is basically serving at the beginning the first 200 nautical miles of range, because the vast majority of trips in reality, if you see from a consumption perspective, are happening in that range. And the other point is the tipping point of adoption in the fleet. In our discussions with the fleet operators, basically, for the first time, it's interesting, the dynamic, because we come and say, okay, we can do this, so what can we choose the areas? And they said, oh, I was about to go to a meeting in the investment, the board meeting for investments, to decide what are the investment we have to do on the fleet in terms of new vessels or retrofitting the past one. And obviously, chicken and egg, we are not making any investment because we don't know how to charge those ships. And then the dynamic changes immediately. And they tend to pull you into the migration because they see the economic case. It's the environmental case, obviously, that has economic impact, that has reputational impacts, and so on and so forth. But in the end, we have to follow the money as the rule is cheaper.
Okay, thank you, Stefano.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.